you've answered question number 1. You've done a great job because you knew what I was going to ask you and you are the world's foremost expert. Now we're going to get into questions 2 through 8, and that's really the heart of the interview. In these questions, what I'm assessing is your experience. Do you have any background that's going to help you be successful in this role? I'm assessing your fit. How are you going to fit in with the folks that already are on the team? And I'm assessing your thought process. Can you stay organized? Can you answer complex questions? And can you demonstrate your mental agility as I pose different questions to you? These are questions 2 through 8, but I'm also going to teach you about how to avoid the bear trap, and that's coming up in a minute. In questions 2 through 8, I'm going to be assessing your experience along the way. I'm going to ask you a question something like, tell me about a time when you had to solve a complex problem where the root cause was unknown. That's a very open-ended question. I'm not asking you to tell me about anything in particular. You'd be surprised about the answers I get and how they fail to capitalize on the opportunity that these types of open-ended questions pose. And so here's an example of that. One time I did an interview and I said, tell me about a time where you had to solve a problem where the root cause was unknown. What steps did you take and what was the result? That's a pretty basic interview question. You can use this opportunity to tell me anything you want, and all too often, this is the answer I get. That's a good question. Opportunity. Yeah, unknown. Can you repeat the question one more time? Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. Tell me about a time when you had to solve a root problem where the cause was unknown. What steps did you take and what was the result? That's a good one. Okay, so this one, no, I don't want to do that. Look, it's not the best example, but it's the only one I can come up with on the top of my head. This one time I was in prison and I was in a cell with a person that I didn't know, and I had to figure out what were they in prison for, but you can't just ask it. You can't come out and ask what their crime is. And so somehow I had to understand what was my cellmate in prison for without asking him straight out. That's a real example. I really got that answer one time. I never asked, have you been to prison? But you just told me that. I didn't need you to, you probably shouldn't have, but this happens all too often. And so to avoid that misstep, replace the things that you don't need to share with the greatest highlights in your career. And so the exercise here to get ready for all of the rest of your interview questions is write out on one piece of paper. Take some time at home, sit on the sofa with a beer, turn the mirror in the rear view and think about all of your highlights in your career so far. And you may not think there are a lot off the top of your head, but that's because that's not what we're used to as people. We're always focused on the future, we're always focused on what's next. But I promise you, if you take a minute, think about your past, you can remember the games that you won, or the victories that you had, or the best moments in your life so far. List all of those accomplishment bullets out on one piece of paper. Try to get about 15 or more. So once you have your 15 accomplishment bullets on a piece of paper, the next thing I want you to do is write a 3 to 5 minute story for each one of those accomplishments. Tell me the beginning, middle, and end, or a situation, action, and result. Think about the accomplishment bullet, put it into a clearly communicatable, quick 3 to 5 minute story, and then write out a list and tie it to something that matters or something that you think I'm going to ask you. So what are some things that you think I might ask you? I might ask you about teamwork, about diversity, about complex situations, about your work ethic, about values, you name it. Tie it to something that could be important. And when you do that exercise, here's what you're going to end up with. My example for me personally is that when I served in the US Army, I was awarded the Bronze Star. I've never been in an interview in my life when someone asked me, so Frank, how many Bronze Stars do you have? It's never happened once, and I promise you it will never happen. However, I've never left an interview where I do not mention the fact that I was awarded the Bronze Star, because I think it's something that differentiates me and it's something that I'm very proud of. And so for me, it doesn't matter what you ask me. You can ask me about a root problem that was unknown and how a root cause of a problem that was unknown and how did I solve it. You can ask about difficult people. Here's what it will sound like. So Frank, tell me about a time when you solved a problem where the root cause was unknown. What steps did you take and what were the results? Well, let me tell you about this time. I was a captain in the U.S. Army Infantry Battalion serving overseas in Iraq. Our outpost was under constant indirect enemy mortar fire, and people were getting injured and killed on a regular basis. We didn't know where these attacks were coming from. I formed a band of volunteers. We went out into the local community. We found an informant that indicated to us where they were attacking us from, and we captured and located the mortar position. As a result, countless lives were saved, and everybody on the team of volunteers was awarded the Bronze Star. Period. It doesn't matter what you ask me, I can use that same 3 to 5 minute story for just about anything. Ask me about a time when I had to work in a difficult situation or stressful environment. I can tell you about the time I was awarded the Bronze Star. Ask me about a time when I had to work with people that were different from me and how I handled different cultures. I can tell you about the time when I was in Iraq and I was awarded the Bronze Star. Again, it doesn't matter what you ask me. I have all of my best accomplishments here. They're right at the top of my head. I've done some work to put them into clear and communicatable 3 to 5 minute stories. And I know what I can use and how I can frame those answers for different types of scenarios. So think about what are your accomplishment bullets and use those to your advantage so that when I ask you a question about a situation or experience, you're not telling me something that is unimpressive. You're answering my question, which is rule number 1, but you're giving me something more valuable. And I just want you to think about that for a second. What is the thing that you're going to tell me that's more valuable? And go back to my comments around answering at the right level. If I'm asking you about what it's like to be successful and I'm interviewing you for a team leader position, and you tell me about how you were successful as a team member, you've wasted an opportunity. But if you tell me about how you've already led teams and you use leading team success as an example for this question, it helps me feel very confident that you can be successful in the role for which I'm interviewing. So just to recap, to prepare for questions 2 through 8, write out 15 or so accomplishment bullets. For each of those, write out a 3 to 5 minute story with a beginning, middle, and an end, or a situation, action, result, and then list out and brainstorm where and in what scenarios and examples you can use those stories. As a result of this, you'll have all of your best thoughts, all of your best moments, clearly thought out, ready to go at the top of your head, and you avoid answering a question with something that is arguably less than your greatest moment. The next thing I want to talk about in questions 2 through 8, in the heart of the interview, is the 2 different kinds of questions that I'm going to ask you. One type of question is situational. I want to know what situations you have been in the past and what happened. So it might sound something like this. Hey, tell me about a time when you did A, B, and C and what was the result? That's one kind of question. Tell me about a time. The other kind of question is completely different, but sometimes people get it very confused, and that is, what would you do if? It's a hypothetical. It's, hey, based on your experience, how would you handle this? And I can't tell you the number of times people come to the interview table, I ask them to tell me, hey, what would you do if you were faced with a situation like this? Because I want to know how your brain thinks. I want to know how you think through these problems. What would you do in this situation? And then people answer it with, oh, well, let me tell you about this time that I did this. And my response is, that's not what I asked you. And remember, rule number 1 is answer the damn question. I asked you to tell me what you would do, and instead you told me about something you've already done. And for me, that's a red flag, because it means you're not listening to my questions, you're not paying attention, and you don't really get the finer points of what we're going through here. So 2 different kinds of questions. Tell me about a time and what would you do if? Fundamentally different questions that people get wrong all the time. Here's what that looks like as far as how you should frame your answer. In a situational question, what I want you to give me is a situation, a few actions, and a result. Here's how that sounds in practice. So, tell me about a time when you showed up to work and the building was on fire. What did you do and what was the result? Okay, well, one time I showed up to work, building was on fire, there was smoke coming out of the windows, thermometers were exploding, fire alarms were going off, flames were leaping out of the building was on fire. So I immediately set to evacuating the store, I pulled the fire alarm, I got everybody out, I called the fire department, and I did a quick sweep of the building to make sure that everybody was out and nobody was in danger. As a result, no lives were lost, minimal damage to equipment in the building, and I was awarded the local fire brigade's Safety Hero of the Year. Okay, situation, action, result, it's pretty clear. And by the way, the result is favorable because I got some award and no one got hurt, and it's a good result. Here's how that same type of question sounds if it's a what would you do if question. If I ask you what would you do if you showed up to work and the building was on fire, instead of giving me a situation, action, and result, I want you to use the following format: analyze, plan, implement, follow up, and adjust. It's very simple. Someone taught it to me years ago, and it works really well to help structure your thoughts, and structuring your thoughts is incredibly important in stressful environments. So here's how that sounds in practice. So what would you do if you showed up to work and the building was on fire? Well, first thing I would do is analyze the situation. I'd look to see, is the building still on fire? Is there smoke coming out of the windows? Is the fire alarm going off? What are the thermometers saying? I would analyze all available data. Then I'd come up with a plan that included my partners. And I would think about, how do I evacuate the building? How do I get everybody out safe? How do I account for any missing inventory or damaged goods? And what do I need to be doing right now as far as my plan? Can I include some partners in that? Then I'd go ahead and I'd implement that plan. I'd get people moving in the right direction. I'd get things happening as quickly as possible. And then I would check back and follow up. I'd say, hey, is the building still on fire? Are things still bad in the area? Is it still very hot? Smoke alarms going off? I would follow up and see how my plan is working. If it's working, great. If not, I would adjust, and I would change the plan to try to find a different way to be successful. I would analyze, plan, implement, follow up, and adjust. And team, I'm here to tell you, someone taught me that secret years and years and years ago, and it has served me so well and so many others over countless interviews and years. And I'll tell you, one time I was doing an interview, it was with a business leader and an HR manager, and they asked me a what would you do if question, and I answered it: analyze, plan, implement, follow up, and adjust. It's just a skeleton that helps me frame my thoughts for me to put the meat on the bones. The next question was another, what would you do if? And I said again, I would analyze, plan, implement, follow up, and adjust. And the HR manager looked at me as if, who told you the answers to the question? Who gave you the tips and tricks? Because clearly you know what you're doing. And I promise you that if you understand the two different kinds of questions, what would you do if, and tell me about a time, and you can answer them appropriately, you'll be light years ahead of your peers. It happens all too often that people get confused, and as an interviewer, what I will do is I will mix it up. I'll ask you one type of question one time, I'll ask you another type of question another time, then I'll go back, and all I'm really trying to see is, can you keep up with me? Can you understand where we're switching the game here? And can you stay focused? So it helps if you have your notebook handy. You can say, okay, he's asking me tell me about a time, so I need to do a situation, action, result. Or if I say, what would you do if, and you give me analyze, plan, implement, follow up, and adjust. Understanding those two different types of questions will put you light years ahead of your peers and help you be really prepared to answer the questions incredibly well. So we're still talking about questions 2 through 8. I've told you how to get ready for them by listing out all your accomplishment bullets and the work that comes with them. I've told you about the two different kinds of questions that you're going to get, whether it's a tell me about a time or a what would you do if. And now here's the last piece of information that I can share with you, and that's avoid the bear trap. At some point in this interview, I'm going to give you a bear trap question. And a bear trap is really an opportunity for you to step on your own feet and cause yourself more trouble than you want. This is a question that is going to be sounding innocent in its delivery, but it's really me trying to figure out, are you willing to throw yourself under the bus? And if so, how big and meaningful of a bus is this? And does this become a red flag where I cannot hire you? Here are some examples of bear trap questions. So, tell me, in your opinion, what do you think is one of your biggest weaknesses or challenges in the workplace? That's a pretty simple question. People get asked that all the time. All too often people say, well, you know, my biggest challenge is waking up on time. I have a really hard time, I haven't been sleeping well, and I'm late all the time. and doesn't matter what alarm clock I get, my biggest issue is just showing up on time. Okay, red flag. I don't need people on my team that don't show up on time. I didn't ask you about that. You offered it to me. You stepped right into the bear trap, and it's basically the end of the game for you. Here's another one. I might ask you, we have a very diverse workforce here. We believe in diversity and respecting everybody. Tell me about a time when you've worked with folks that might be different from you, and how do you handle that? That's a very basic question. People get asked that all the time. If you come back to me with an answer like, well, I have a really hard time working with people in the following generation because I think they have a different work ethic than I do. Okay, you just stepped into the bear trap. We got all kinds of people in the world, and if you're on my team, you need to be able to know how to work with all of them. I didn't really ask you if you have problems with different generations, but you told me that you did, and that's going to be a red flag, and you're out. So think about what are the types of bear trap questions that I might ask you. There's some examples in the workbook that you can think through ahead of time, and understand that you can use this to your advantage, and you can flip a negative into a positive. And if I say something like, hey, tell me about your biggest opportunity in the workplace, instead of stepping into the bear trap and ending your chances at promotion, you can actually turn it into something that can be positive for you by saying something like, well, historically, one of my biggest challenges in the workplace has been my work-life balance. I love to work. I love this industry. I love this type of stuff, and I tend to just pour myself into it and work all hours of the day and night. That can have a negative impact on my family. It can have a negative impact on my team because I might not be setting the right example. So I am self-aware enough to know that my challenge is historically around work-life balance, and I do a lot of reflection to make sure that I'm balancing those two priorities appropriately. Okay, I just gave you a chance to tell me what your problem is, and in essence, what you just told me is your biggest problem is that you love to work, which is cool because that's what I need you to do. And so think about how you can leverage a bear trap question to turn a negative into a positive and actually tell me something that's good about you instead of telling me something that's bad about you that I may use to disqualify you for the opportunity. So that's the bear trap. So we're wrapping up on questions 2 through 8. We've talked about the different kinds of questions that you're going to get. We've talked about using your examples that are your proudest moments to answer those questions. And I've told you how to avoid the bear trap and use it to your advantage. Now we're going to move on to the end of the interview and how to wrap this up and get the best chance of getting a job offer and promotion.